The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, last night's swing states elections, a cautionary tale for the Democrats. And congratulations, America. We're now officially bathing in the cruel and unusual era. Chicago elects its first African-American woman and openly gay mayor. And the left makes big strides on Chicago's city council. Meanwhile, the House votes to subpoena the Mueller report and Chief White House Personnel Security Director. Corruption probes crisscross North Carolina's Republican Party. And Wisconsin allowed to pull out of the Obamacare lawsuit. It appears the Ecuadorian government is on the verge of booting Julian Assange. And Trump punts the fake healthcare plan to 2021. Meanwhile, the Trump administration okays dangerous baby strollers. Yes, seriously. Turns out Bernie is the Trump of the left.
Dana Milbeck is such an idiot.
I guess that means I win.
I guess good news for me.
Meanwhile, 70% of the country is unaffordable to the average American homebuyer. And lastly, Dems blow it on the defense budget. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is Wednesday, and Matt is out. Brendan is very diligently and confidently operating the board today.
Flying this water boat just right.
You're doing very well on that. Let's start. We will be, I mean, we're going to have to play the thing where Donald Trump can't say the word origins, but just because it's too funny. But before we get to that, let's get to the part that's not so funny. Here is Donald Trump calling for the abolishing of immigration judges. I don't know exactly how this would work, but there has to be some process for adjudicating the asylum claims of people unless we essentially roll back the asylum laws and say that there cannot be any asylum in this country, that we will reject any folks who are subject to the myriad of reasons why we might offer them asylum in this country, who, of course, narrowed the opportunities for asylum for largely people from Latin and Central America in terms of domestic abuse or fear from gangs. But here's Donald Trump. Here's another solution to this. Just get rid of the judges so that there's no way to adjudicate these, I guess. I mean, it's gobbledygook, but let's listen.
And what we have to do is Congress has to meet quickly and make a deal. I could do it in 45 minutes. We need to get rid of chain migration. We need to get rid of catch and release and visa lottery, and we have to do something about asylum. And to be honest with you, I have to get rid of judges. Every time, and you won't even believe this, Mr. Secretary General, you catch somebody that's coming illegally into your country, and they bring them to a court. And
they bring him to a court. Can you
And
believe
the Secretary General of NATO is like, yes, this is crazy.
Oh, my God.
I mean, who ever heard of such a thing? You have courts? We don't do that in the Eurozone.
No, we have large tubs of water. We just throw them in. And if they float,
They might be getting close to that in some areas.
It's possible.
Just for the record, the number of people who are granted asylum by judges right now is fairly low.
Oh, it's. I don't think it's certainly not higher than 30% of the cases that go in. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 30% is my understanding. But it slows the process down that they have to contemplate whether. I mean, this is just absurd, and it's not a legitimate proposal. Of course, none of it is. It's all absurd, it really Donald Trump is running on his strength. He is returning and reverting to the mean, which is we're going to attack. I mean, this is where he rode down that escalator. The one thing that really resonated from his opening speech when he ran in 2016 was that they're sending over their worst rapists and whatnot. I'm sure some of them are good people.
It's his leitmotif.
Indeed. And speaking of that motif, here is Chris Kobach, the possible pick for Trump's immigration czar. Recall that Chris Kobach was laughed out of multiple courts on his attempt to disenfranchise voters. And this guy really has it in for non-white people and their ability to vote. He was a charlatan going around to various counties, I think, across the country, getting them to dump people from their roles and then offering his legal services to represent them in the court cases that proceeded, and then lost the cases. But here is Chris Kobach on with Lou Dobbs.
And this one is deploy immediately dozens of immigration judges, as well as a fleet of passenger planes, and the thousands of empty mobile home trailers that the United States owns right now and is attempting to sell at bargain prices on the internet. Instead of selling them, deploy them to border cities and create processing towns that are confined. And so when someone comes in and falsely claims asylum, we don't release them for 6 months onto the streets of the United States. We process them right there in that camp where they have the 3 square meals, they're living in a nice mobile home, and then as soon as they're done, as soon as the claim is rejected, they're on the next plane back home. And then the people back home suddenly realize, hey, he just left here 2 weeks ago and yet he's back. Maybe going in these caravans isn't such a great deal anymore.
All right, so the theory is that what we're going to do is build areas that are obviously we're going to have to put fences around them. And what it will do is it will sort of concentrate them in these camps. That's what we're looking to do. We're going to try and concentrate in these crossing towns, concentrate them in these camps, and they'll have nice little trailers to live in, and we'll give them 3 square a day.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, indeed. And
maybe we'll give them some work to do.
This whole theory
Maybe work is the real freedom.
This whole theory that they're going to get sent home 2 weeks later and tell all their friends, like, don't bother going, again, either is purposefully ignorant or just completely uncaring as to the situation that forced them out of the country in the first place. The reason why you get people who get booted from this country and then they come back again and attempt to come in is because their living conditions, their situation in which they are returned to is untenable. So even the traveling itself becomes a way of escaping that. And so the bottom line is we've seen the benefits of actually providing aid to these countries. There's plenty of data to show that as we provide more aid to these countries, they have the ability at least to protect some of their own citizens. And, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of disingenuousness here. I mean, none of this is
fascism is not genuine.
And
It's
they're
usually in the road
basically-
to its fascism.
They're basically doing what he said already. Like a small number of people get out on parole. Most people are kept in what they call hileras or ice boxes, which they keep very, very cold on purpose so that people will give up and go back.
And that's why we also have now something at least 15,000 children that we're warehousing, because they've also scared the relatives of those kids from coming to pick them up. So that's all been mission accomplished, ladies and gentlemen. Just a reminder, even if we eat kale salads and drink green smoothies, we're most likely not getting all the essential nutrients we need on a daily basis. Enter Ritual, the obsessively researched vitamin for women. In 2 easy-to-take capsules, Ritual provides 9 nutrients you need to support a strong foundation for your health, all in their clean, absorbable forms. I, of course, as you know, am not a woman. I have not been taking this, but we have farmed out the process of taking these vitamins. And I can tell you, we've gotten very good recommendations. Apparently, the big thing is that they source the vitamins that are in Ritual. So you can tell where your omega-3 is coming from, your vitamin B12, your iron, your vitamin D3, your boron. Apparently, that's really good for bones, is my understanding, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And one of the best things I've been told about Ritual is that it reminds you to continue to take them after you've finished them. So in other words, you finish a bottle, the next bottle is there. That has always been my problem with taking vitamins. Like, I'm supposed to be taking those vitamin Ds. I forget, and then when they run out, I forget to get a new thing. All of Ritual's vegan-friendly, sugar-free, non-GMO, gluten-free, and allergen-free ingredients, all their sources are out there and for the world to see. It's only $1 a day to have all the essential nutrients your body needs delivered every month. No strings attached. Better health doesn't happen overnight, folks. And right now, Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Fill in the gaps in your diet with Essential for Women, a small step that helps support a healthy foundation for your body. Visit ritual.com/majority to start your Ritual today. That's 10% off during your first 3 months at ritual.com/majority. Also, the Majority Report is being supported in part today by Simple Habit. Simple Habit, a mobile app, provides a massive and diverse library of 5-minute guided meditations. And the Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. There is lots of research out there.
Plethora of research.
I put Michael on it, and even with his research skills, found immediately stress.
What I
else?
did was I was like, let's see what Wikipedia say about this. Looks like a lot.
Stress. It helps you with stress. It helps you with
Depression, pain,
sleeping,
anxiety, sleeping.
Sharpens your mind. A lot of people say meditating makes them more productive. Simple Habit has over 2,000 guided meditations especially designed for different parts of your day, just about anything you might be dealing with in life. They have guided meditations for mindfulness, meditations for anxiety, for depression, for when you're having trouble falling asleep, for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or when you have something important going on at work. Meditations designed for parents. I feel like I could have that on a, I should just have that blaring in my house anytime I get home with the kids.
I want it blaring in here.
I'm not going to say which child did this, but I can tell you that one of my children last night threw a very big fit. I let them watch, one of them watch a 24-minute television program. And I said, he asked me if he could at the end of the day, can I watch one? So I got dinner prepared, and I was like, yes. And they said, oh, but wait, we're going to take a bath first. 30 minutes of calling me a liar and telling me that he hates me.
Well, I mean, frankly, you should be a little bit more clear in your words.
I should have. That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, I think he's got a point there.
They have meditations made specifically for when you're waking up or your lunch break, or when you've gotten home from work, when you're going to bed. Different people are trying to accomplish different things with meditation, and Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what their goals are with meditation or how much past experience you've had with meditation. The variety of guided meditations on Simple Habit is what sets it apart. Simple Habit just won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Well-Being App. It's available for iOS, Android, web browser, and the Majority Report audience can try it for free for a week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. That's simplehabit.com/majority. And if you're watching or listening to this program, we've put it in the descriptions below. So check it out.
Hey, Rachel, how's ritual working for you?
I knew that was coming.
Oh, you did you? Because you
did.
have sharpened acuity because of your female supplements?
Yes.
Boom.
You got me. All right. So let's talk about what took place last night. There's really two big things I wanted to get to. One is this ruling in the Supreme Court, and this is really, I mean, let's start with the Supreme Court. So I guess this was 2 days ago now. Supreme Court was looking at a case, Bucklew versus Prisseth. I don't know who Prisseth is. Probably somebody associated with a prison, or and it was a case involving a guy who was on death row. This guy, Russell Bucklew, he committed a brutal murder in 1996. He was sentenced to die. And the guy has what is known as cavernous hemorrhagia. It's a disease which causes basically tumors to grow around your head and your neck and your throat. And this guy, Bucklew, was going to be killed by the state of Missouri. And they wanted to give him a shot of lethal dose of barbiturate pentobarbital. I don't know what the name of it is. And however, Bucklew is afraid that the drug is going to cause him to essentially choke on his own tumors, causing him extreme pain and suffering in the last minutes before he dies. And most of the stuff is I'm reading from Ian Millhiser, who writes for, I think this Think Progress is legal. He's the legal editor over there. And so the idea is that, the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution says that you could not have punishment that involves cruel and unusual punishment. And this guy, Bucklew, is arguing that, well, it is cruel, in particular, to kill me in such a way that I'm going to suffer dramatically at my death. And for literally decades, the way that the Supreme Court has viewed the idea of cruel and unusual is that cruel, obviously, or I should say unusual, implies that a particular punishment has become less and less common. Right? And as it becomes less and less common because people just become repulsed by it. It actually becomes, its constitutional foundations become weaker. So there is this concept, as Justice Earl Warren explained in 1958, that the Eighth Amendment prohibits punishments that defy, quote, evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. So back in the day, right, like 1500, you were going to kill somebody. You know, one of the ways they would do it is they would cut your stomach open. They, you know, tie you down, cut your stomach open, let your entrails come out.
It was a tough deal.
And that was just the way that we kill people. And then maybe we chop their head off.
An eye for an eye.
Over time, however, we found that kind of punishment to be grotesque and overly cruel. And apparently, this standard has been tossed by Gorsuch in favor of a standard that the unusual measure is pegged to the time of the framing of the Constitution. What? So Gorsuch was talking about punishments that would have been forbidden at the time of the framing. Quote, these included such disgusting practices as dragging the prisoner to the place of the execution, disemboweling, quartering, public dissection, burning alive, all of which Blackstone, he's referring to another judge, savored of torture or cruelty. He adds that by the time of the founding, these methods had long fallen out of use and so had become unusual. So unusual is not an evolving standard. It is one that is pegged to basically 200 some odd years ago.
That is actually originalism in a nutshell. That's one of the reasons it's such an incredibly fraudulent, doltish way of reading the Constitution.
You got to put him up a little bit. I can't.
That's.
Are you talking into the microphone?
Yeah, absolutely. That's originalism.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
That's originalism is a structural problem. I mean, that's their standard for everything.
Yes. And so he defines the word unusual to mean punishments that had long fallen out of use at the time of the founding, not punishments that are uncommon today. So this evolving standards of decency in the context of the Eighth Amendment has been thrown out. And the definition of cruelty for this guy has also changed under a case in 2015 called the Glossop v. Gross case. Because that case determined that the death penalty enjoys some form, according to Ian Millhiser, of super legal status that protects it even from private citizens who refuse to be complicit in executions. Glossop, and I think people might remember this, is when there were drug manufacturers who decided that the drugs that they were selling, which weren't developed necessarily to kill people, refused to sell those drugs to states that wanted to use them to kill people. And so what happened is that some states turned to other drugs, painkillers of questionable reliability, which, according to Elena Kagan, writes Millhiser, left death row inmates with the feeling of being burned alive. And that because that was the case, that was a torturous death and amounted to being cruel. At the time, the conservative majority, Sam Alito, who wrote the Glossop opinion, dismissed the drug company's refusal to be complicit in executions as a guerrilla war against the death penalty. And he held that because it is settled that the capital punishment is constitutional, it necessarily means that the way of that the idea of executing people, there must be a constitutional way in which to do it. So in other words, if it's constitutional to kill people, the means in which you kill people must also be constitutional, or at least one must exist. And so if there's only one option to kill people, and even if it happens to be super painful, that is not enough to prevent the execution. So the idea is, and in this instance, the burden at that point falls upon, if you can believe this, the prisoner and their lawyer to come up with another way in which they can be killed. And there's even a greater burden, because this guy in Bucklew said, okay, well, I have another idea. You can asphyxiate me with nitrogen gas. Put me in a room, pour some nitrogen gas in there, I'll die. According to Gorsuch, that's not enough. You got to come up with a plan that describes how we can protect the people who administer it, that we can protect the, you got to come up with the whole thing.
You need to redesign the prison. All right.
Death row inmates must not only tell the courts how they wish to be killed, they must offer a proposal that is, quote, sufficiently detailed to permit a finding that the state could carry it out relatively easy and relatively quickly.
So he's just a sadist.
Well, but here's the thing. Oh, yeah, no, he's a sadist. So that is basically a slight sideshow. It does not give prisoners a very easy way, essentially, to come up with an alternative that's not going to be super painful. So the bar in which you can suggest some other way has been raised to where you can't just suggest another way that you want to be killed. You got to suggest another way to be killed that will make it easy for the state and safe for the state. And you need to have that proposal really drawn out. So in the absence of that, you can be killed in a way that is extremely painful because A, the definition of unusual really only pertains to things that were unusual 200 years ago, 250, and the definition of cruel now is not something that is cruel, de facto cruel. It'll cause you a ton of pain, yes. But that's not the legal standard for what is cruel, according to the Supreme Court now. The legal standard for cruel is if the intent is to cause you a lot of pain.
Yes, and the intent will be, as ever, undeterminable.
Well,
and even if we had brain imaging software to prove somebody's intent, we couldn't use it because that wasn't accounted for 200 years ago when the Constitution was written.
No, no.
How would you do that?
How would you? This is how the court would determine that the intent is to make you to be cruel.
If somebody wrote it,
if you, as a someone on death row, wrote out with your lawyer an extremely detailed plan with schematics and how this you were going to be killed by using some type of nitrogen gas that was going to make it perfectly safe for everybody and would involve no risk, would be super easy, not too prohibitively expensive. And then the state said, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do the one that's going to cause you a tremendous amount of cruel.
It was all specced out. That really speaks poorly of you.
That's how you would prove that intent.
Could you not argue that having a prisoner write the sort of specific details and logistics of how they're going to be killed is a form of torture in and of itself?
No,
I mean,
you could argue that, but no, you would not have a hearing at the Supreme Court.
Right, but you would be
what kind of circular logic is that to say that cruel and unusual punishment is constitutional because killing people is constitutional?
Well, that is that's the way that they work.
It doesn't make any sense. Although I guess, killing people in and of itself is cruel and unusual. So in that sense, they might be right.
They have not found that the actual act of capital punishment is cruel and unusual. then they're just assessing the means in which you do it. So understand, though, what this means. Aside from it meaning, and there have been less and less executions as we evolve, mostly in non-red states. A couple of blue states, I think, still have it. But as we evolve as a species and decide that the state should not be permitted to execute people in cold blood, and I'm happy to have this debate about capital punishment, but that's aside. The import of this is not only that we can do this in a what any normal human being would consider cruel and unusual in terms of the of killing people, but that this group on the Supreme Court, as is constituted now, these 5 have no problem overturning 50 years of precedent, 60 really. And they're not terribly explicit about it. In other words, they're not saying we're overturning this precedent because we found it to be X, Y, or Z. They are just reinterpreting things like unusual, reinterpreting things like cruel.
Well, this position allows you to be the ultimate judicial activist, because if everything that is written at the time of the founding is essentially illegitimate, then actually it gives you an incredible amount of room to hack away at a couple hundred years of legal work.
I mean,
without any intellectual coherence or rigor. And this whole thing, people really should look at, even, as distinct from the PR and the communications aspects, but the origins of things like the Federalist Society as these august academic projects are just another arm of PR machinery. It's fake law to not only against evolving standards liberal law, but against even common law, established precedent.
We're lucky that there's an amendment abolishing slavery except as a punishment, or they would probably try to bring that back too.
Right. Well, it's still there for prisoners. You can still do it according to the 13th Amendment. All right, and the reason why I started with that one is because in Wisconsin, and obviously a state court doesn't necessarily deal with doesn't deal with U.S. constitutional issues, but it has. But the import of our courts, completely understated, I think, by far too many on the left. We're starting to see people discuss it now in the context of some of the proposals that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are proposing, insofar as you think the courts are going to let you do that? Now, that's a battle that I think we should have and make it more explicit, but it's a real shame that it's going to take another 15, 20 years before people go through the process of realizing how important the courts are and then actually starting acting upon it. Maybe AOC will be able to implement those policies that Sanders proposes in 2021, 10 years later, after she adds 2 more people to the court. But we'll see. But last night, there was elections across the country. Well, not across the country, but I guess sort of spanning the country. There was an important one in Pennsylvania. There was obviously some important local races in Chicago. And there was a hugely important one in Wisconsin. Last April, 2018, there was a statewide race for the state Supreme Court where, and I don't know if they actually register as partisan, Democrat or Republican, but the Democrats supported one candidate, Republicans supported another. Democrats crushed them. And I think if you'll recall, that's when Scott Walker said, ring the alarm bells. There's a real problem here. we're going to have a real problem in the midterms in 2018, and he was right. There was a huge win for Democrats in the fall. Now, of course, Wisconsin is famous for having where Democrats can win 54% of the vote and only get 36% or literally 36 seats out of 100 in the state Senate. The problem is redistricting and gerrymandering. And really the only way to deal with that, now that the Supreme Court has all but said, like, yeah, we don't care. And not only have they said they're on the verge of saying we don't care, they're also on the verge of saying, and these independent commissions that you set up, these nonpartisan, this vehicle you have to make sure that they're somewhat fair so that you don't have a situation where 54% of the people vote for a specific party and only 36 out of 100 of their representatives win. Those independent commissions, those may not be constitutional either, because the role, the authority to draw these districts is given specifically to the state legislatures, and they cannot outsource that even to an independent commission. So winning the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, in a state specifically, not just like Wisconsin, but specifically Wisconsin, is huge. Because once you own the state legislator, you also then can start to disenfranchise a lot of voters. This is the way it works. And that's what they've done. 1 million people voted last night. 1.1, actually. Million people. More, 1.2 million, I think. And the Democratic-backed candidate trails the Republican-backed candidate by more than 5,000 votes. So you're going to see a recount, but 5,000 votes, hard to imagine where that's going to be made up. Unclear if it's going to head to a runoff or a recount. But apparently there just was not the kind of turnout from the Milwaukee area that we hope. Now, I don't know if there's a failure of not enough money being poured into that race, whether it's an institutional failure, the institutions and the big money don't appreciate the importance of this, or frankly, your average voter, 7/8 of your 1/8 of your average voter just does not appreciate the importance of this stuff. This was a Democratic leaning, a liberal, however you want to describe it, a liberal vote on the court. She had to step down because she has cancer. So this is now the Democrats, the liberals, however you want to call it, they were, I think it's like 4-3, and now it's going to be 5-2. So the idea was they wanted it 4-3, and then they wanted the presidential election where voters come out in a lot bigger numbers to carry the day and then take the state Supreme Court. Milwaukee County not performing as well for the liberal side as it did in 2018. 2018, liberal candidate won by 41,000 votes, 31.5 points. This time, 97 precincts in, margin is 30,000 votes and 24 points. So you just have 10, 11, 12,000 people. Again, if that number sounds familiar to you when it comes to Wisconsin, it should. Because that's 2016. Just sitting it out. And I get the argument you need to have better candidates, but I'm sorry. Out of that 1.2 million people who voted, if there are 10,000 people in there who can articulate the difference between a left-leaning judge and a right-leaning judge in any sophisticated way in terms of the state Supreme Court, and I would include myself as being not part of that percentage that could, then I'd be shocked. This is basically, broadly speaking, because people don't have the time to dig into the intricacies of state law and determine the voting patterns or the decisions and read the decisions of potential state Supreme Court candidates. This is good guy, bad guy. This is not a persuasion situation. It is a mobilization. And part of that mobilization has to be to make people understand the stakes of a state Supreme Court and of a federal Supreme Court.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because I want everyone to vote for progressives in every election, and progressives can't do anything if they're not in office. I also understand that a lot of people have heard it all before, and they don't make a connection with how this is going to help their lives. So it's a little column A, a little column B.
The problem is, like, these people will come out to vote in 2020. But it's going to be too late in 2020 to save the state Supreme Court. I don't know who's in charge of making people understand the relevance of the state Supreme Court. It's a failure of our civics. It's a failure of our education. It's a failure of left-leaning groups, frankly, to articulate the importance of these seats to the voters. And, it's I don't even think they're affiliated with the party per se, and I don't think you can be partisan to sit on there. But certainly the Democratic Party had a vested interest in getting people out to vote. It's just they've got to figure it out. They've got to figure it out. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, in a suburban seat, and this I think is indicative of, when we talk about the surge in voting, right, that we saw in 2018, we talk about the resistance, as it were. I know that's a bad word and it's associated with bad people, but whatever you want to call it, a Navy veteran who served in George W. Bush's Department of Veteran Affairs won a special election to fill a state Senate seat in suburban Pittsburgh. This is a district President Trump won in 2016. Pam Iovino will represent the state Senate district that covers parts of Allegheny and Washington counties after she beat out D. Raja, a businessman who chairs the Allegheny County Republican Party. He took 51% of the vote in that suburban district. The fact is that white suburban women, many respects, are driving a lot of the pickups that we saw in 20. I mean, we talked about that leading up to the election. There's a lot of data to support that, but this is more. Here it is. This is Democrats flip this Pennsylvania Senate district. SD 37 was last up in 2016 when then Senator Guy Reschenthaler won by 22%, as Trump carried it by 6%. That is a big flip. Big flip. So earlier this year, though, Republicans won a Democratic-held seats in Minnesota, Connecticut, and Kentucky. So this is the first seat of the year flipped from Republican control to Democratic hands. So there's been some demobilization in specific areas of the Democratic coalition. And so people got to get to work. Still going on in the suburbs, apparently, though, which is interesting.
Well, can I offer a potential counterpoint? Not necessarily a counterpoint, but something that we need to worry about. It might be slightly out of keeping with the blame the electorate theme.
Whoa, what is that?
So, and I do think of Malaika Jabali's stuff on. Probably nobody knows more about African American voters in Milwaukee than her, right? And so, sure, all of the things you said are true. People in general need to know about the importance of these races. I'm also curious about how did races get scheduled like this time-wise to begin with? Like an obscure off election in April is obviously not favorable.
1.2 million people. Yes, I'm sure.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, it should. But regardless, it should.
Well, she had cancer.
It should. Right. Okay. Fair enough. That's true. But it should always be a pivot point to talk about universal registration and things like that, which I know you agree with. But I think a difference though in mobilization between people in the suburbs and people in a place like Milwaukee is that if you are in the suburbs, you can, and you're very comfortable financially, your politics can be an expression primarily of just cultural disgust with a certain party, as contrasted with a group of people that have felt correctly that a party has steadily not delivered for them. Now, again, I'm not mitigating the importance of the vote, so I don't want to get down that rabbit hole, but I do think it does attest to some bigger problems and structural challenges they need to take on.
How do you account for the drop-off between 2018 and now?
Well, how do you account for the drop-off between 2012 and 2016?
Oh, I mean, I think that explanation goes well. I think there was a sense that, and I think there was. I mean, I think there's multiple things. I think people.
There's multiple.
People thought it wasn't that important.
Yeah,
people thought that
what
the maybe the differences weren't so dramatic, and maybe some people thought Trump was going to lose. But when you talk about the difference of like 6 or 7 months, to me, it just resonates that they just don't see the importance of the state Supreme Court. And so I think there has to be an attempt to educate people to the importance of such things.
I agree with that. I
would imagine too, that
I wouldn't
that coming out in
educate, convince, persuade.
It's not just persuade. I think like
educate still sounds a little condescending.
Yeah, I think I agree. I have that same sort of concern.
Well, I think, frankly, there's a lot of people who don't have any sense of the importance of the courts. Do you want to say tell them, but as opposed to educate? But I mean, I don't think there's. I think people. People need to be educated on it, and it is a difference between a state Senate seat and in the suburbs because it's a more localized race. Not nearly as many people voted, I'm sure, in that Pittsburgh race, and there's also an argument. I think that without the same amount of media attention you get from a federal election, people just don't think it's as important. So they don't take work off that day, or they can't take work off that day, or they don't take their one day off that they can, or their one time that they go in late. I mean, I understand there's a lot of different factors here.
But in terms of electoral politics in general, if we want to talk about 2016 as well, or if we want to talk about people in the UK even, I'm still thinking about those people in the black barber shop in Milwaukee that the New York Times interviewed around the time of the 2016 election who didn't vote and did not believe that it was going to make any measurable impact on their lives who the president was. And I saw in the UK, Novara Media, Ash Sarkar spoke to some non-white teens, working class teens, about labor and about Jeremy Corbyn. And they're like, Jeremy Corbyn can suck my dick. Like, we've heard it all before and nobody ever does anything for us. Labor hasn't done anything for working people for a really long time. So it's
hard. It would be hard on Jeremy Corbyn's knees. It's a little fragile.
Indeed. So it's really, it's a catch-22, like I said.
Yes, but I'm comparing it from 2018 to 6 months later and saying, like, what accounts for that? Like, why, if there was that failure in 2016 to communicate to people the stakes of it, why did it work in 2018, 2 years later, but not 7 months later?
Well, in 2018,
4
months later.
In 2018, just the pure, like, you're not going to be able to run a campaign for a state judgeship with the mobilization effects of I want to just cast a vote against Donald Trump. I mean, that's a pretty clear difference.
There's still 1.2 million people voted.
But that's a pretty obvious reason there in terms of why people should. I mean, even if you go to like where I go, I have never seen turnout.
So the argument
I actually saw more people. I actually saw more people in 2018 for a midterm than I did in 2016. And it was purely to register in opposition to Trump. That was the overarching message of the midterms, for sure. And that's much harder to leverage that for a judge's race in April. I mean,
all right.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I think arguing that the 2018 election is driven that much by Donald Trump, which I think is true. I think also that may hold to 2020.
Yes.
I
agree with that. When have I said otherwise?
All right.
I've never. I don't even know what you're sort of intimating, but I've the one who said from the beginning that I think basically any Democrat could beat him. So I don't know if you're trying to get some.
No, I just think that is. I mean, that runs a little bit contrary to the idea that there has to be a reason for better candidates for that to bring people out to vote.
It's too linear. Like there's definitely an atmospheric and broader dissatisfaction that, again, please read I don't know if you've read her articles in Intercept or Current Affairs or the New York Times.
I read
reporting. Okay, so then you understand that.
Yeah.
And so there's that as an important variable. It's an overdetermined thing. And then there's also the fact that I have no doubt, even using myself as obviously an outlier in a very different case study, but like I felt the motivation to go out in 2018 and register something against Trump, even though I have plenty of problems with most Democrats and almost no votes I was casting had anything to do with Trump. So, not, again, especially for normal voters, they're not thinking in these super narrow kind of nerdy ways. They're taking in different impressions and different impulses, and there's no contradiction between a broader dissatisfaction and anger and also wanting to give Trump the finger. I mean, of course not.
Yeah. And when I talk about how decades of failed neoliberal policy helped get us Trump, I am not really talking about the people who might have voted for Trump out of economic anxiety. I am much more talking about poor people and oppressed people who don't vote for Democrats because they don't think it's going to do anything. They just don't vote.
They just don't vote. Meanwhile, in Chicago, however, and I don't really know much about Lori Lightfoot's politics,
I've
to be
heard
honest
really
with you.
mixed things about who's the progressive in this race.
But it is at least notable that Chicago elected its first African-American woman, who is also an openly gay person, to be their mayor. But the more, I think, ideological, perhaps, story is that 50 out of the 50 seats on the city council, at least 5 are going to be held by DSA members. That's pretty
50,
nuts.
50
Hell
seats?
yeah.
Is that a 50?
And it could be 6. The 6th race, or I should say, I think there was already one, but there was another race as of last night. My old friend TW emails me at 9:35 that candidate was down by 47 votes. So good thing to go out and vote, folks.
You vote, you bastards.
But, I mean, I would be very surprised to find out if 10% of the electorate or 11% of the electorate was members of the DSA.
Shocked.
In Chicago.
No,
that is a pretty
That'd be
big,
pretty cool, though, huh?
That is a pretty big number. And it just shows, what energy can do. And it really just shows on some level, like, cynicism is a waste of energy.
Cynicism is a privilege, and it benefits the Republicans.
Yes, and the idea that you can have 10, maybe, I can't do the math, 11, 12% of the city council of Chicago be members of the DSA. That's nuts. That is just nuts. And
That's a plan so nuts it just might work.
That's
Get
right.
with it, New York. It's embarrassing.
All right, folks.
We got plans. Don't worry.
Just a reminder, and I enjoyed this last night. Calming Comfort, my Calming Comfort blanket by Sharper Image. It's the luxurious weighted blanket that's designed with high-density comfort fill to promote a sense of calmness for a restful night's sleep. The Calming Comfort weighted blanket comes with a 90-day anxiety-free best night's sleep of your life guarantee from Sharper Image. Right now, our listeners can go to calmingcomfortblanket.com, use the promo code MAJORITY at checkout to receive $15 off the displayed price. Again, that's calmingcomfortblanket.com, promo code MAJORITY, because you cannot put a price on a great night's sleep. All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. When you become a member of the Majority Report, not only are you supporting this daily show, sometimes we do news like we did today, walk through a couple of issues that I don't feel will get any attention on the news. Other days we do in-depth interviews. Then what we do is we go to the fun half and we make fun of people for a long time. For the most part, sometimes we have people call in who've made fun of us on Twitter, and then I yell at them. That can all happen on this program.
That's fun in its own way.
I did get
You have failed.
I did get into a little.
I'm gonna get a montage of those Sam drops right there.
Yeah, well, you can't. He's talking underneath me, so we were talking past each other. But on the plan is, I should say, on Friday we're going to pre-record a discussion with Glenn Greenwald and I, which will probably run following Tuesday. It's the idea right now. Anyways, you can become a member and support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, not only are you supporting the program, not only are you getting the extra fun half if you want it. You don't have to have it. You can just listen to that. You don't have to listen to the other half. It's up to you. But you also get it commercial free. So there's 3 bonuses. And I know every now and then I get an email. Why don't you? You've got it backwards. The fun half should be the free show. The interviews should be the non-free show. But when we have a guest on, a lot of the guests don't have the opportunity to go on many shows, don't get much attention. I think they have great ideas. And the whole point is to amplify those ideas. And if we put it behind because it's all about ideas. We got a clip of Dave Rubin. I don't think he knows what ideas are.
Yeah,
I'm just more interested in ideas.
I'm just interested in things that can't really be in any way where I can say things and they can't be disproved or critiqued.
He's so dumb.
So go to jointhemajorityreport.com. As always, if you cannot afford a membership, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Then wait until I get through the emails, and we'll get back to you and hook you up. Apologies for that. And also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. This is the month to try out those coffees you've always been wondering to try out. 30% off. You don't even need to use the coupon code majority, but you might as well plug it in there anyways. All right, folks. Michael, last night was Tuesday.
It was an excellent show. Kim Ives, the English language editor of Haiti Liberté, talked about the uprisings in Haiti and this mercenary operation, which may or may not have connections everywhere from an apartment building by the BAM in downtown Brooklyn to the Trump administration, and basically an attempted bank heist. Then Malaika Jabali on the why of how Hillary lost Wisconsin and how we can win it, the internal diversity of the African-American vote and how that should affect political analysis. And we made fun of Beto O'Rourke for quite some time, and the ANC going into the 2019 South African elections. Patreon.com/TMBS, Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube for clips.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we too made fun of Beto O'Rourke with a little rendition, a little update of Fugazi, if you will. We've been kind of falling off of doing our songs, but for those of you who don't know, we are also a musical podcast sometimes. We also had on Rona Lorimer to talk about the Gilets jaunes uprisings in France, which are still ongoing. We spoke about her recent article in Commune magazine, The Yellow Vest Diaries, and I think it was a good conversation. So check it out.
Brendan, you want to talk about anything?
This week on Literary Hangover, Lady Barbarina by Henry James. Story about rich and beautiful American girls heading to England to find themselves through marriage.
Good for you. All right. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them.
Almost has what?
Almost
has what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
You see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
All right, let's go to the phones. It's the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Calling from a 647. Where are you calling from? Who's this?
Hey, Sam. It's Sebastian from Canada.
Sebastian from Canada.
Oh.
Now, wait a second. Did I hear you? Are you the guy who called into Jesse Lee Peterson's show?
Yeah, I thought I could have just asked you to go on his show, but I decided a better way of getting it done would be to pretend to be him.
Well, I heard we meant to play that clip, didn't we, or something? I don't know. I saw. I think maybe I was watching on Progressive Voices the that you called into his show, and he didn't remember who I was like 3 days after our interview.
He didn't know who anybody was.
Well, that's true. That's true. But that was pretty funny. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And so he's going to moderate a debate between Crowder and I. Is that right?
Yeah, I just thought since they're in contact with each other, it would just be one more way to, give Steven Crowder nightmares.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. The giveaway for me is when he said, "Who's Sam Crowder?" That was the one that let me believe that maybe Jesse's not exactly the most reliable person to count on for setting up a debate.
No, I think it's his producers who handle that, and I just wanted Crowder to get the email. I just liked imagining that.
Yeah, that would be pretty funny. So what's on your mind today?
But anyway, I wanted to talk about the dodgy imam. Remember that guy, Muhammad Tawhidi?
The dodgy imam?
Yeah, Michael talked about him on TNBS. He's this guy who's from Australia. He claims to be the imam of peace. And I kind of agree with Michael at first. I thought this guy was like, his end goal was to just be, to cash in on the right-wing kind of like, I'm the Muslim who tells the real truth about Muslims type of thing.
Right.
But I think that's, while that is true, I think that might only be his means to a further end.
I got to be honest with you,
which is
Sebastian. I got to be honest with you. Like, I don't know anything about the dodgy imam, and I don't really.
He's funny. We make fun of him on TMBS sometimes.
Yeah,
but let's
save this call for TMBS.
Well, not unless you're a patron. You can't call if you're not a patron.
Okay.
Oh, is it? Are you serious?
Fuck yeah, dude! You crazy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize,
I
Pac-Man.
don't do all this. Like,
I'm sorry. Did I call you Pac-Man? I'm sorry.
Hey, I respect. Hey, if nothing else, the hustle.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, Sebastian, but
Become a patron at TMBS. We'll talk about the dodgy imam.
I'm dead broke, man.
It's pay to play apparently on
Pay
TMBS.
to play, buddy.
I had no idea.
Pay to play.
I had no idea.
Absolutely.
Sorry
Well,
about
see
that.
I mean, I'm not trying to make myself heard. I just wanted to offer a suggestion for Michael to dig deeper into. That was the point.
I don't think. I mean, I actually, all kidding aside, I mean, I will a little bit, but I do think he's. I mean, the only purpose of someone like him is someone who's so obviously ludicrous, being in like when Dave Rubin has him on, it's funny, it's two idiots, whatever. But when Sam Harris goes, it's refreshing. That's funny in terms of Harris's credibility, but I don't think that requires more than a few segments and a couple of jokes.
Appreciate
Thanks,
the
man.
call, Sebastian.
Although probably if Trump gets reelected, that guy will end up being like the head of some type of counterterrorism program.
I didn't realize you couldn't call in if you weren't. How does
Post-game calls, actually, yeah.
Jeez.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Calling from. I had no idea
take
about
capitalism seriously.
Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. It's Mike from Pennsylvania.
Hello, Mike.
Shut the fuck up.
Hi.
Hockey bullshit. I'll smack
I'm
your
sorry.
face
I'm
out
sorry
of
if
your
I
mouth.
sounded distant. I was just immediately started thinking about like maybe I got to charge more for the phone service. Out of
Yeah,
this
maybe
office.
you should. Maybe all of a sudden Mike got some ideas. Let me guess, he's going to use my numbers, but without any of my insight. All right, go ahead, Mike. Fucking loser.
No, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about
Well,
charging,
you can
charging
shut
you.
up too, you Jew.
Mike, what's on your mind?
Well, we had a special election here in Pennsylvania. I'm sure everyone's excited to hear about Pennsylvania State Senate, but
Did you not hear me talk about it?
yeah, no, I did. I did. But what happened? Because I heard a lot of blame the electorate language for the results in Wisconsin, which are super disappointing, obviously, and it's going to be a disaster for decades to come, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, you know, in this special election, this is an R+8 seat. It's a Romney-Trump district that was flipped. So pretty right-wing, actually. And it happened with 65,000 voters. Now, in 2016, about 150,000 people voted.
Right.
So the truth, I mean, it's a much smaller electorate than voted in the presidential election. And that's not surprising because it's a random day in April.
Right.
You know, and traditionally this advantages the Republicans. You know, typically Democrats are lower income, you know, people of color, younger, just people who don't have time to randomly show up on some weekday.
Now, wait. Describe this district for me, though, because my understanding is it's suburbs. Is it not? What's the nature of the suburbs?
So I think this is it has some of the suburbs of Pittsburgh and some of the exurban areas as well. And it has like a higher income, more educated area, very white. I want to say it's like, I think the district is like 90% white. Let me just pull it up here. Yeah, it's 97% white. The district that we just flipped. And so where the places that she performed very well is the wealthier suburbs, very educated areas close to the city of Pittsburgh.
Interesting. So that is like almost like Mindy, right?
Yeah, I would say it's got some of the Mindy areas for sure of the Pittsburgh suburbs. Yeah. You know, one of the things that's interesting is I think Pennsylvania is starting to, you know, knock on wood and anything could change, but I think it's starting to pull closer politically to the Northeast and away from the Midwest, where I think Wisconsin has seemed to go the other direction. It's pulling a little bit more right. Same thing with Ohio. If you look at the elections like last year in Pennsylvania, the Democrats absolutely crushed, you know, all of the big races like the governor's race and the Senate and many of these congressional seats. They lost some tight ones, but they were all like in the reach districts.
Right.
Whereas in, you know, Ohio, they lost the governor's race. They had Sherrod Brown, but he was the exception. In Wisconsin, Scott Walker only lost by like 0.8%.
Right.
It was very, very close. So, you know, it's not a surprise that in a very low turnout election that they steal one like this.
I'm sorry, say that again. Not a surprise that what?
It's not a surprise that in a very low turnout election in Wisconsin that the Republicans could steal one. They would never win this election in the presidential election.
Yes, in the presidential year, right. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, is 1.2 million that low of a turnout for? I mean, I guess it is relative to the presidential year, but I mean, relative to like a Supreme Court special election.
No, it's not for the Supreme Court special election, but that is a very. I mean, like. It's sort of like who votes in special elections tends to be very old white people who have the free time.
Right.
I mean, it technically, I don't think it was considered a special. I don't like to be too much of an election nerd, but you know, from the point of view of increasing turnout, like there's two theories of it. The first is you browbeat the electorate, you try to shame people, and you say like, "Hey, it's your fault that you didn't turn out," and that is somewhat effective. But the other and much more effective way is to make voting as easy, as simple, and as painless as possible.
I totally agree. The problem we have in Wisconsin is the mechanism to do that has been completely foreclosed because you have all these gerrymandered districts, and now you have a Supreme Court that's out of reach, and so you can't. There's no path. Right? Like, I mean, they won 54% of the vote in 2018, and they only have 36 out of 100 seats. It's rigged. It's totally rigged. And there's only one way. There's only one way. And this is for reals rigged, ladies and gentlemen. There's only one way that they're going to get out of this, and that's if, you know, and I don't understand, you know, I don't understand why, you know, someone like Tom Steyer, I do understand, but it's just it's a damn shame to me that Tom Steyer is going around spending ads on impeachment or whatever it is. Take some of your cash and dump it into Milwaukee, for God's sakes.
Well, Sam, like I've tried to tell them that before, and I'm sure, but they have consultant scum around them who want to buy ads on television. They're not interested in, like the Republican Party has Red Map, and they've had it for like 2 decades. They also were very highly successful in gerrymandering after the 2000 election, which people don't realize. So we've had gerrymandered districts, and this is something I've ranted about on the show for like 20 years.
Right.
And after 2010 is when they really stepped
that's
it up.
basically where you just had the computing power really to and sort of the data collection, so that where you could take Facebook information, you could cross-reference it with, the difference between the data available on voters between 2000 and 2010 is huge. Huge.
Oh, gigantic. And even since then and now. So
right.
Another round of gerrymandering. I mean, Jesus. But the other thing is, like you mentioned in Wisconsin, well, in Pennsylvania, Democrats got 56% of the vote and got 45% of the seats.
And because, just explain this to people, because it was the congressional districts that the state Supreme Court said you've gerrymandered in an unfair way, and so we're going to change those. I still don't get, and I asked you this like a couple of our conversations ago, why someone hasn't brought the same case with the state districts. What's going on?
I don't. I mean, I've talked to people about it, and I don't know. I don't know why.
What do they say when you talk to
around,
people? Are you talking to like just the guy who works at the Piggly Wiggly, or are you talking to anybody in politics?
No, like a political director of Fair Districts, PA, or whatever. Like,
and so what does that do?
The idea is, right now in Pennsylvania is going to be okay because the way our districting works for state legislative districts is the majority leader gets there's a 5-person committee, and the majority leader gets a person, a minority leader gets a person of each house, and then the 5th person is appointed by the Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now, Pennsylvania, because we cared about our Supreme Court elections, we now have a 5-2 Democratic majority, and so we're going to have a Supreme Court justice appoint someone who is, let's just say, fair.
Right.
And so there's no concern, from what I understand, that there's going to be a problem. In 2010, the Republican Supreme Court.
Okay. So if I hear you correctly, the process is going to allow, based upon the personnel in there now, the process is going to allow in 2020 for these districts to probably revert without the need for a court case.
And there's concern that politically it looks like they don't want to put too much political strain on the Supreme Court. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Because last time around, the Republicans screamed that it was subverting democracy, and there was a huge, I don't know if you remember this, and they were going to impeach all the Supreme Court judges, et cetera, et cetera.
And they were even talking about like the U.S. Supreme Court coming in there. I understand. All right. It makes some mistakes.
Sam, John from San Antonio. Can I get a word in edgewise with this long-winded motherfucker for a second? I'd just like to make the following 2 points. First of all, listening to Mike from PA talk about numbers, I've often analogized to both a blind person playing tennis and you parenting. And I say that for the following reasons. His predictions have proven to not only be wrong, but fundamentally flawed in their premises. I would like to offer him a bet on my version of how much Bernie wins by in the Pennsylvania Northeast versus his guesses. And my proposal is that if I win, I smack him across the face, and that if I win, I smack him across the face, because I say with mathematical certitude, I will win. He's a fucking charlatan. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
John, I didn't think you were so ableist with the Jesus.
That's a misuse
All right,
of the term.
All right, Mike. Appreciate the call.
Kill you.
Thanks, buddy.
Gotta jump. Peace.
Right. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hey, this is calling in on the Chief Schmuck line. Jeff George, hello.
Oh, this is the Chief Schmuck, Jeff from Georgia. All the goodies got in early
That's right.
today. What's going on, Jeff?
Hey, man, not much. Don't worry. This call is not about any vocabulary enthusiasts who may have appeared in your program on Friday. No, this is about Joe Biden. I want to shit on Joe Biden a little bit because that guy's not cool, everyone. I want to bring up something I hadn't heard talked about on the show a little bit. Back in 2008, when Obama, before he selected his running mate, but after it was clear that he was going to be the Democratic nominee, when they floated out Joe Biden's name, everybody in the media and the Obama camp, they all gave the same reason, right? And then what they said was Joe Biden's foreign policy experience. You guys remember this?
Yes.
Joe Biden was on the Foreign Relations Committee, big in the Senate, had a big reputation, is known a lot about global affairs, was going to help this rookie, ex-state senator, right, from Illinois, really understand how the world works. But what I always took that as, especially in hindsight, is that what they really meant by that is Israel. And talking about Israel in the news these days is pretty important because I think more and more people are waking up to the downright shameful apartheid state they're running in that area of the world. And Joe Biden is, among other problems that he's not going to help us with and probably make worse, is Israel in that whole situation. He's never been a friend to the Palestinian people. He does not want to see the Palestinians free. And he's got no interest in roping in Israel's worth excessive. And that's part of the reason I'm extremely worried that between the race between Bernie and not Bernie, which is basically how it's shaken out, he's the strongest not Bernie. And this does not really seem to be hurting him, at least not with the Democratic primary.
Well, the Israel thing is changing a little bit, step by step. But, Joe Biden is the quintessential AIPAC Democrat, and he always has been.
Do you think that he's dramatically different than like Kamala Harris would be?
No,
or,
no, I don't think so. I think I think Kamala Harris, but I think Kamala Harris is an awful
right. I mean,
issue.
I think
the difference. I think generationally, though, I think that I think that maybe like when Beto says Netanyahu is racist, that sends a signal amongst the younger people, whereas Biden has no reference point for even having a discussion on the issue. But I don't think I think that in fact the only mainstream prominent Democrat that I think even marginally defected on this at all was Obama until Bernie. But Obama in the second half of his second term started to get a little bit fed up. But Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, mostly Elizabeth Warren. It's all the same garbage with that stuff.
Appreciate the call, Jeff.
I appreciate you. Congratulations on 500K subscribers.
Nice job.
Well done,
Brendan. Let's go over some of the clips that we have for today. Look, I don't want to make too much of this, but I do think it's funny. For some reason, the President of the United States cannot pronounce the word origin, or maybe he cannot remember the word origin. I mispronounce things all the time. All the time. I mispronounce names quite a bit. I stutter. I have all sorts of verbal tics, but this is pretty funny. And he does it. He says it up front, and then this is a long clip, right? Because he says it comes back around. That's the funniest part. And he knows that he can't say it, which is also funny. Like a lot of people are saying, like, oh, this is signs of dementia, or obviously, whenever you see something like this, the first things you think, if you're on YouTube, is Parkinson's, of course, or some other problem. I have no idea.
Syphilis,
untreated
effects?
Syphilis.
Yeah, does untreated syphilis affect people's speech patterns? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Does being addicted to, I don't know, say like diet pills as something, as an example? Just a thought.
This could just be that he just can't access the word, and I certainly go through that. But I can tell you that when I can't access words, at least for me, it's because I haven't slept, and that's usually because my kids wake me up. Now, of course, Donald Trump probably has not been even near his kids at any time at night, or at least.
Well, I don't know.
But so
There's
maybe
one that I'd like
maybe
to
something
be
else
near
keeping
at
me
night.
up at night. But who
Sorry,
knows?
Jared. It's date
Here he
night.
is talking and attempting to say the word origins.
Hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings of that investigation.
Oh, the beginnings.
You look
Oh, the
at
beginnings, not the
origin of the investigation, where it started, how it started, who started it, whether it's McCabe or Comey or a lot of them. Where does it go? How high up in the White House did it go? You will all get Pulitzer Prizes, okay? You're going to all get Pulitzer Prizes. You should have looked at it a long time ago. And that's the only thing that's disappointing to me about the Mueller report. The Mueller report, I wish, covered the oranges, how it started, the beginnings of the investigation, how it started. It didn't cover that. And for some reason, none of that was discussed.
The oranges. Oh, my God. The oranges.
He knows he's not saying it right because he says the beginnings.
Oh, yeah. No, he knows he can't say it. And then
That's a tough one.
I'm going in one more time.
one.
The oranges. The startings, the beginnings.
You know, actually, I heard from many people
God.
that origins that's the mispronunciation. It's supposed to be oranges.
Oranges.
And then it was ruined in the common usage.
People say I don't know how to
used the
say that word,
original.
but I don't like it. It's not a good word. Oranges.
It's a bad word. So I renegotiated.
Oranges. Oranges. Just couldn't wrap himself around it.
Two of my kids are losers who try to be my criminal conspirators.
It's like
one of them's my girlfriend, and I don't know where the other one is.
His spray tan has seeped into his brain. All he sees is orange.
I don't know what. Should we play the German thing too? That's just like where he keeps getting where his dad was born wrong.
Well, that's because I don't believe a word about where his dad was born, frankly.
Wait, you don't think he was born in New York?
A lot more documentation about that. I don't know where. I don't know. I'm just asking questions.
We need to see the birth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Let's turn to something that's a little bit more disturbing coming out of the White House, and that is this guy Hogan Gidley, right? Yep. If I remember this guy Hogan Gidley, he was I don't know if he was Rick Santorum. He worked for somebody else in the primary. I can't remember who it was, and I'm quite sure
he worked for Santorum at least in one primary. Yeah, so he was in 2012. He was the main Santorum talking points guy.
And here he is on MSNBC. And part of the reason why I think the White House does not feel obligated in any way to provide support for Puerto Rico, part of it is that Donald Trump doesn't like the mayor. Part of it is that he doesn't feel they'll vote for him. And part of it is they just don't consider them Americans. They just... it just runs contrary to their perspective of who should be Americans and who should not be Americans. And it is not just Donald Trump who feels this. It infuses I'm convinced, the entire White House. They all share this. That's how they all have. That's why this guy's been there since day one and he's still there.
Common bonds.
They have a common bond, a common perspective on who is a real American and who's not a real American. And Hogan Gidley, just if you don't focus on this stuff, sometimes some of the truth seeps out.
Is they have received more money than any state or territory in history for rebuild.
That's not true.
100%. There is nowhere that's
Louisiana got more after that hurricane.
They have not
that's not a true
They have
fact.
not come to $91 billion with all we've done in that country. They have had a systematic mismanagement.
I'm sorry. All we've done in what? Can we go back a little bit?
Louisiana got more after that hurricane.
They have not
that's not a true
They have
fact.
not come to $91 billion with all we've done in that country. They have had a systematic mismanagement of the goods and services we've sent to them. You've seen food just rotting in the ports. Their governor has done a horrible job. He's trying to make political.
that country.
Well, I agree. So it's time to immediately decolonize them, leave the occupation, and allow them to govern their own economy. I mean, you know what's so depressing and sickening about it is that Puerto Rico is a literal colony, obviously. And if the United States actually stopped colonizing them, we would still financially colonize and terrorize them the way we do the rest of the Caribbean and Latin America. So it's two orders of colonization. But it is incredible to actually go to a place that it's like, is Haiti essentially a colony of the United States and Canada? Yes. But it's
Functionally,
functionally
right.
it is. It's still mind-blowing to actually be in a place where it's just like, no, that just is. It's a colony.
Right. We're not saying that it's functionally, we're not just here to be exploited. We're actually literally that's what
we
called.
do. And if you're lucky, we'll stop testing weapons on one of your islands and accidentally killing people. And
that could bring economic activity, though.
Right. I mean, they need to look. I think ideologically, I support Puerto Rican independence, but at the very bare minimum, every single Democrat, for even very crass reasons, needs to campaign on giving them full states' rights
Absolutely.
aggressively and constantly.
Absolutely.
Also, he said that they gave $91 billion in aid to Puerto Rico, and that is not true.
I am shocked that they would lie about something like that.
Well,
according to factcheck.org, it was actually 11.
Well, both ends with one.
He's probably he's also probably putting in some
yes,
private
he's probably
sector,
adding up and
hedge loans. And
yes,
all sorts
we
of
have.
Other.
We have, yes, they would probably forgiven private debt
Dynamic
on some level.
Scoring.
It would be interesting to figure out what that number is because it's probably grotesque.
Yeah, how'd they get that? Show your work.
So the president is threatening to shut down the southern border, as you know, and no one, I think, thinks that he's going to do it because, of course, the problems involved in shutting down the border would be, in some instances, catastrophic for a lot of border towns, I think, in the United States, and catastrophic may be a little bit extreme, but for other industries in this country. And here is the Federalist Molly Hemingway on Fox News. I can't help but to think that maybe they're not really going to do this, but I do feel like there is a little bit of a test balloon to just get a sense of what's the appetite for something like this. It's also part of their, I think, their agenda to try and make it seem like there's such a crisis that's going on at the border right now, such a crisis, that maybe we need to do something like this. This is akin to Joe Biden's people floating Stacey Abrams, right? It's because
they didn't ask Mexico if they could do it.
No, the idea being that you're just planting, you're proposing things to give people a different perspective on who you are, or what you're willing to do, or how bad. And so this whole idea about shutting the southern border is just a way of trying to enhance the characterization of their crisis. But but then the problem is that you get sent out because you're a shill, and you've got to come up with a rationale for it. And that's where it starts getting a little bit trickier. And here is Molly Hemingway's best shot at this.
Reports are showing that almost half of our veggies and about 40% of our fruit does come from Mexico. But I understand the president's issue, too, and his stance on this. Do you think that he should shut down the border?
I'm not even sure about that, but the idea behind shutting down the border, there would be two issues there. One, there are so many people flowing over the border, there are so many people flowing across the parts of the border that are not currently guarded, that they need to shut down the ports of entry to monitor those areas and also the flow of drugs there. The other issue is that sometimes you want to have a little bit of hurt so that people are incentivized to do something about the situation. That's true not just in this country, but in other countries, and facing economic consequences for not taking this problem problem seriously or not doing enough to stop it is one of the ways that you can make people care more about it. In this country, though, where we should be most concerned, there are things that our legislators should be doing, closing loopholes. We have laws that incentivize trafficking children, either having children come as unaccompanied minors or knowing that if people come with children, they kind of get a free entry into the country. These are things that our lawmakers should be worried about right now.
These guys. We actually have laws that actually make it seem like we don't want children to suffer.
Well, hell yeah, let's have a U.S. Brexit and see how that goes. The problem is, of course, that they're only shutting down the border for people. Capital is still free to flow freely and exploit people wherever it wants to.
You know what? I would like to see them shut down the border for a day, and we can measure. We can measure exactly. That's why they'd never do it. We can measure what constitutes a crisis. Like, oh, nobody's getting, an avocado costs $17 now, but at least we don't have people streaming over the border.
The avocado costs $17, but at least there isn't Mexican food.
One less reggaeton party at Prospect Park this weekend.
Shit. That's going to hit home.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 646 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello? 646. Where are you calling from?
Is this me? This is George from New York.
George from New York. What's on your mind?
Hey, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Ben Shapiro is going to be on Joe Rogan today. And I just wanted to ask, like, these guys, these alt-right guys, get so much funding, and they end up getting a lot more views on YouTube. And I literally, every time I open up my podcast app on my phone, I get an ad for Ben Shapiro. And I'm just wondering, what we can do to combat that ideology when it's clearly getting funded a lot more.
I mean, I don't know. Tell people about our shows. Honestly, this has been an ongoing issue. And I don't think the left institutionally, again, the money on the left, I think wastes their money in a lot of ways. You could have spent a couple $1 million on that state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, made a big difference. There's all sorts of different things that people could do, with money to support the growth of shows like ours. Doesn't even mean direct funding. I mean, there's all sorts of like ancillary support things that could be done, but there's just not an appreciation for that stuff. Funding on the left is very difficult. It's very difficult because part of it is a function of very often you're railing against the people who have that kind of money. Even if it's not them specifically, the idea of people having that kind of money is problematic. And then I think there's also just a quality to people on the left who fund things. Because of the nature of people on the left, I think the idea, there's always, I think, a lot of those people want to use their money as a mechanism in which to be creative.
That's a fucking good point.
Thank you. And so more often than not, you don't get sort of the funding for the banal, more operating expenses type of things. It always has to be the Sam Seder project or specific projects are funded on the left more than like the operating expenses of stuff. And that's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, you and David Pakman have the same amazing set from IKEA, but you look at Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin, and they've got like this real fancy studio, and then people eat that shit up.
Yeah, maybe I get upgrades a little bit, but yeah, no, it's true. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for the upper.
Thanks.
Yeah,
bro.
Yeah, that was great.
Why don't you guys have more people? Maybe it's because Ben Shapiro's got better furniture. Peace.
Oh, look at that Ben Shapiro studio.
Stop it. Knock it off.
Calling from a 210 area code. Look out. Brendan's got into like the...
Man, he's
Brendan
in the
got in,
mind meld right here.
Brendan got into the liquor cabinet. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Mo from D.C.
Mo from D.C. What's on your mind?
I just want to talk to you all about what you all were talking about earlier with like Hillary Clinton. 2016 election, 2018 election, and like the amount of people who voted. How the votes went up, how many people voted in 2018 in comparison to 2016 and things.
Sure.
And I want to specifically talk about in the black community about the way, I want to generalize for a second, even though I know it's not that great of a thing to do.
Right.
But just to talk a little bit about what I think a lot of like white liberals get mixed up about like the black community. Because I hear you all talk a lot about like the barbershop and the people who, with the New York Times article.
Right.
Interview with the black guys in the barbershop. And
yeah, that article does a lot of work. But go ahead.
I just think that people think that if you went back to that barbershop, there would be like this great awakening of like the people would be in the barbershop would be like, yeah, I can't believe how, horrible Donald Trump is. And yeah, we need to do something about it. But I just don't, just from my experiences, I just don't see that happening because, and I'll do it for a few reasons. I'll tell you a few reasons. And,
please.
And I could start off with like,
Go ahead.
And I would start off with like, in 2016 with Hillary Clinton running, I would say that me as a millennial, I was born in 1987. The first president that I can remember in my life is Bill Clinton. I didn't pay attention when George H.W. Bush was the president or anything. I didn't know anything about that. And
right.
My father was obviously a Democrat, so I knew Bill Clinton as the president, my very first president. And the only things that the 90s represented to me as a black man in the United States, that the Clintons represented to me was a system of like persecution of, I don't want to use that word lightly since, what's like globally, it's much worse things happening.
Right.
But I remember the 90s as like a system of persecution with what was going on in the welfare system and the crime bill and how many black men were being put in jail. And just, growing up, I had, on my mother's side, I have two uncles who did over 20 years in prison. I have an older cousin who did over 20 years in prison. I have two aunties who were addicted to crack cocaine and heroin for over 20 years. So, I think that a lot of people miss the emotional, like, representation that the Clintons brought when they were running, when Hillary Clinton was running, because it was I don't know, I just think that the Democratic Party needs to do a lot more with the emotional appeal to black people in general, because the policies, everybody's not like a political junkie and really knows a lot of the things that are going on when it comes to policies. And I think a lot of liberals misunderstand that a lot of black people vote for Democrats solely because they're the party that's seen as like not racist, in comparison.
Right.
Because I think a lot of black folks have more conservative views, even when you're talking about things like the Supreme Court and the things that we might lose, like abortion rights or equality for the LGBTQ community or gun rights. I think there are way more black folks in this country who believe in those ideas. Like,
do you think it's also
making abortion illegal, letting you have any gun you want? I think there are more black people who believe in those things than people think.
I think there's definitely
So,
more.
I mean,
I don't know what the data is, but I think there's definitely more than than people think. And
Well, it tracks with the data that we've had on this show before of the general population that shows that there is not a constituency for fiscally conservative, socially liberal out there.
I just want to say the reason. I mean, I do think Malika's pieces are really important. But I think the reason the Wisconsin piece does some work is I think it sort of speaks to some of the things you're talking about, and it doesn't. I mean, I'll say for me anecdotally, amongst a lot of conversations with just sort of more normal, less politically obsessive people generally, yeah, there's a huge amount of hatred of Trump, but not necessarily the same sense of total disjuncture between what's happening now and what came before. And the same level of personalized freak out about Trump that you get in more sort of, whatever, liberal educated circles. That's totally true. That tracks completely. And I also think, I mean, it would probably be helpful if people got a little bit more serious about understanding the specifics of different electorates and the diversity and differences inside them. Versus these sort of big, broad strokes.
Yeah.
So Mo, let me ask you this. So, I mean, that being the case, that there is a portion of the African American community that it has an earned cynicism about any political party being able to delivering on whatever that promise should be, and even with an awareness of the Democratic Party is at least not actively almost like promoting its racism. How do you break through that? I mean, if there is a sense of like, and we go back to that barber shop and people are like, yeah, whatever. He's not doing anything that we didn't anticipate him doing, and he's not, we're not surprised. I mean, what? I mean,
I just believe that all goes into this, like what James just said. It's more about the general public, and I think black people suffer from the same things that the general public does. It's a misinformation. It's just not understanding the policies and the legislation, because it's like the argument that we're having with Bernie Sanders in comparison to the other candidates when it comes to reparations. Like the facts are that Bernie Sanders has been progressively pushing for black rights and justice and equality his entire almost his entire life. But when it comes down to the emotional appeal that he has to the black community, I feel like that's where people think he's lacking, because and I think it might just be a Bernie thing. He's not that. I mean, he's not as charismatic as other people are. So it's a little hard to get that emotional appeal. But like I said, I think it's just more of the educating the system. I mean, educating people about the system. And I think why the Clintons were so polarizing to black people is because that was like one of the few times that we could just see it on a daily basis. Just it was just like, you remember when your aunt's boyfriend was hiding in the closet because he couldn't live in the house with your auntie, and you remember, as a 10-year-old being connived out of $5-6 by your auntie. You remember these things, so it creates this emotional.
Well, I guess I understand that
push on the Clinton.
My question is how do you do the opposite? Like, what is that emotional? I mean, because I think, frankly, if you call in and you are, telling me that you're a 55-year-old woman living in the suburbs, the emotional, I think, strategy to get you to vote would be to talk about, the sort of the more disgusting elements of Donald Trump.
It's a moral repugnance, right?
Yeah, and so my question to you, Mo, is what do you think, if it could be boiled down to reach that subsection of people? What is the emotional appeal that you think would be effective?
Well, I mean, I would say something that I think could be done that I think Barack Obama did a bad job at doing is when there are these opportunities to play politics, basically, like during when we were having this national conversation about policing and black men and young black women being shot without guns and things. Even though he had a Republican Congress, he could have done things for the emotional appeal by advocating for a national investigation into the institution of police in this country, and these things probably wouldn't have never happened. But I think constantly pushing
just
for
the idea that you're going to address
create
it,
black justice.
Use the bully pulpit.
Yeah, just putting it out there over and over again that you are constantly thinking about it, because I think that's where the emotional, the unsettling comes from. Is I think black people a lot of times feel forgotten, especially. I mean, it's like how you always talk about it's a zero-sum game at some points. Like when Barack Obama passes marriage equality, it's like I love it, and a lot of people love it. When he passed rights when he's talking so much about women's equality in work, and he's talking about these different things that solely affect a certain marginalized community, but at the same time you never push things that would solely affect the black community. So I think those types of things lead to the emotions being, lead to the emotional stress.
Well,
because you're not
being heard. You're not being heard at all. And I mean, I think Obama's defenders would argue, and in fact, I think I can't remember his name, professor from
Charles Kennedy.
Yes, Kennedy from Harvard came on, and I think I cannot remember the name of his book now, but Oranges. But it was his argument was, and I think there is something to this, at least as far as it goes. His argument was that Obama was very afraid to talk about the black experience in this country because he was afraid of he felt hemmed in and that he couldn't govern in that way because he would be pegged as being there just to help black people. I think sadly that a lot of the population, the white population on some level, came to that conclusion.
He just wants to help black people.
That's, I think, a lot of the data.
Yeah.
A lot of the data that we have seen, we had the asides on to talk about that book, Identity Crisis, which I think is just sort of amazing, where Barack Obama's winning the presidency for 50% of uncollege educated whites was the first time that they realized that Democrats were to the left of Republicans on race.
It was a tough deal.
And so, he was inhibited, or at least felt like he was inhibited, or supposedly felt like he was inhibited. I think there was some of that. For everything we got from him in terms of the black community was all respectability politics. It was all, you got to be your brother's keeper, and it's basically the same argument that Bill Cosby would have given, essentially. And,
watch yourself, devil.
And so then the irony is, of course, that Hillary Clinton had to talk a lot more about race because, in part of the history you're talking about, in some respect, and in part because she needed to make that sell. And I think that cut against her with some of those white voters. But I think, eventually, hopefully, we can get to the point where a politician will feel confident and there'll be an electorate that has been fashioned that will we're talking and addressing those concerns, not just in the course of a candidacy, but in the course of a presidency, will be of net political value, or at least they'll perceive it to be the case. But
it's
appreciate the call.
Because
I mean, I see that. I see that on. I mean, you obviously realize that every day in life. But you when someone says something at work, and you don't press them because you don't want the rest of the office to. You don't want to be that guy to the rest of the office. You know what I mean?
Right.
So things like I understand that perspective that he had, and I would expect somebody like a Bernie Sanders to definitely be able to make more progress with African American justice and equality than Barack Obama could have ever done. So I understand that point. It was just I think that he did a big disservice in the emotional appeal to the black folks for the future Democrats, not just about for himself. It was more about Democrats to come.
Right.
And
I think that's a good point.
I think I want to ask you all a quick question that was not related. I mean, it's kind of related, but not really. Do you all think that Barack Obama will campaign for Bernie Sanders if he wins the primary?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm
going to let you go and we'll answer it. Appreciate the call.
If Bernie Sanders wins the primary, Barack Obama will campaign for him.
I can't imagine that he wouldn't. If he's the general, I think Obama is going to campaign for whoever wins the. But think
Obama's been sending. Obama just undermined the Green New Deal the other day. We know Obama's politics, but that being said, he has gone out of his way on multiple occasions to express personal appreciation and like of Bernie Sanders. So I think he's a smart guy. He wants to be the elder statesman. He's going to campaign with whoever's the nominee.
I have nothing to base this on, but I would say that he is going to always be gracious in public. And to the extent that he's involved in any projects that involve politics, it is how do we not have Bernie Sanders be the candidate in general election?
Oh, yeah. No. I think, of course, his role in the primary is a totally different question.
Yeah, the convention is another question.
If
right?
Sanders, we should keep a very close eye on Obama. But if he's the nominee, I think Obama will go, Bernie.
Yep.
I think he'll do it sort of unenthusiastically and maybe less than he would for a different candidate, but he'll do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's smart because the worst place you want to be in is to have that candidate win and not have it appear to that candidate that you haven't done everything.
He's also, he's a trend watcher. He understands where things are going, where the appetites are.
He will criticize the policies and not the person, that's for sure. He'll go and he'll talk about the Green New Deal being impossible, and he'll say, I don't think the country's ready for Medicare for all, or that type of thing, or private. And we'll hear about that stuff.
He might even, he might be the ultimate,
Bernie's great.
I'll tell you what. But he'll take, I think
Bernie's great, but the country's not ready for getting rid of private insurance.
Folks are real unsettled. So we'll see.
Dragon Slayer. Sam, sad to see you promoting vitamins as well as bras. Didn't think you would resort to Alex Jones level just because Hayes is the feminist ideal man. Lindsey Graham's secret cabana boy. Virginia Heffernan and Rick Wilson were on a Slate podcast, and they were both saying Glenn Greenwald was a Russian asset who wanted to destroy America, and that appearing on Tucker means you support Tucker. Not a fan of some of his thinking, but I thought that was incredibly shitty to say.
Yes, it is incredibly shitty to say.
The Tucker stuff I think is more problematic, but I do not think that Glenn Greenwald is a Russian asset who wants to destroy America.
I also want to say that Glenn Greenwald, because of his appearances on Fox, was able to at least somewhat disrupt the pageantry around Bolsonaro, and he did it on Laura Ingram's show, and Laura seemed very uncomfortable. It was highly appreciated in the Brazilian left. So,
Michael Tracy's glass jaw. Michael Tracy is able to see the big picture. By playing into right-wing bigotry, stereotypes, and prejudices, gives him the ability to sneak into their cult. Then at some time in the distant future, he will be able to surprise these cultists with progressive ideas. At that point, I'm sure they'll be open to voting Ilhan Omar into the presidency. It's called the long game. Canadian curling is the only neighbor of the United States that is not a Mexican country, and a vision of your feminized future. It might be important to pay a bit of attention to the intricacies of our provincial and local politics. God. Good day, sir. JB, cruel and unusual. If punishment is either one of these, not both, it cannot be permitted. And the fact that only a few countries in the world have capital punishment makes it unusual. Chris Lapaco, is it okay to out a closeted gay Republican? I see some resistant wine moms on Twitter saying that because Joe Biden sniffed someone's hair, we should investigate Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. I never knew Mitch McConnell got kicked out of the military for allegedly being gay. Why wouldn't that be important unless they were sniffing everyone's hair and touching them inappropriately?
Is that true?
I don't know if that's true.
Wow. Well, Paco has a future in Oppo research, I feel.
Yeah, if you're actively working against the rights of gay people, I'm sorry, your personal life is on the table.
Geek Wonk, have you discussed the details of Yang's UBI yet? It's exactly as you feared. I'd like to explain if you haven't gone over it yet. I think we'll deal with that later. You know, I'm to a large extent, like, there are some things that come up that it's really hard to ignore, but I'm trying to push a little bit of the primary till at least like May, so that, you know, because we're going to have the first debates in June. And so, you know, but the long and short of it is, yes, the long and short of it is, one of my concerns about a UBI was always a political concern, not so much from a policy standpoint, was that it is an excuse to get rid of other forms of automatic economic stabilizers and of welfare support. And that's what I'm concerned about the UBI, is that it's going to be, and I don't think it's going to be, and that's the big problem with it. Colin from Nebraska. Rogan is an alt-right conduit, but I encourage all leftists to reach out to Rogan, because if you say you smoke weed and have done DMT, you might be able to sway him on important issues. Ben Shapiro's body pillow, please help. Ben, a nightly dry, okay. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Sam, you come across as a big man on the show with your big brain takes and whatever. That's fine, but have you ever taken a puck in the nuts? Lastly, can we get Brendan on the soundboard more often? He's got talent and finesse. First of all, I have. Back in the day when I was a kid growing up in Worcester, we played quite a bit of hockey. I played defense, so there were times, but you wore a cup. And
okay.
The kids were small.
All right, Samantha.
So it wasn't like anybody had like a slap shot that was really going to debilitate you. Brother from Brooklyn, the resistance people screwed up by making never-Trumpers comfortable in the Democratic Party. I've never seen an article comparing Bernie and Trump and Rick Wilson, Navarro, demanding Dems nominate someone they will be cool with. I'm not sure I fully understand.
Remember Navarro?
Yes.
Like, you should nominate someone that everybody could like. Who's classy.
Chad Diaz Stevens, as a TMBS patron, but also an anti-capitalist, I must report there is no intrinsic barrier preventing non-patrons from calling TMBS. What does that mean?
I don't know. People can figure it out.
Oh, because they just call the number after the show.
I don't know.
I mean, that's what I would do.
That's cool. That's what you would do. Whether that works.
Beto O'Rourke announced Wednesday he raised $9.4 million in the first quarter, 18 days.
I am so excited. I have so many platitudes.
218,000 total donations. A majority of the donors are new. Okay, that makes sense. 98% of the donations coming in at under $200. Now remember, Bernie had 520,000, somewhere around there, unique donors. 900,000 donations. just to put this in perspective. So if you tell me that you had 220,000 total donations, assuming there's, it's hard to assume this because, with Bernie, the idea of $27 a donation was a big deal to him. So there might be a little bit more incentive for donors to donate twice, let's say, at a smaller amount than maybe Beto's. But assuming even if half the rate of Bernie, you're talking about 150,000 donors. Not bad. But
anyone could run. It's a free country.
Anybody
Remember
That's what Bernie said.
That's what he said when they were like, what do you think about Beto getting it? He's like, oh, I don't know. It's a free country. It's probably be annoying listening to them spew fucking nonsense on stage, but whatever.
Oh, God. This
Just
is
another burden that I have to deal with.
Guido Ninara. I don't know. I fully believe in the untreated syphilis explanation. Not only does it explain the dementia, his skin tone, his inability to drink water, his fear of stairs, and his weird breathing. Dude is syphilitic. Poor Ivanka.
He's starting to sound like a zombie.
A little bit. Poor Ivanka. Yeah, that was the part that I was waiting.
Nice.
Calling from a 913 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
I'm Scott from Mission, Kansas.
Scott, what's on your mind?
I was wondering if you guys had seen the debate between Kyle Kalinske and Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report on platforming.
I watched a little bit of it, but not too much.
It was for me, it was one of those debates where you agree with I personally agreed with points both people were making, and I sort of got where each of them was coming from. I don't necessarily agree that Joe Rogan is necessarily part of the problem, but I do think there's problematic with the way he brings on people from the right more often than he does the left, but at the same time, he's not in the same camp as Dave Rubin.
Well, I think the problem is this, right? He's not in the same camp as Dave Rubin, but are you familiar with the concept of funnel sales? I mean, basically what it is you get in, and the idea is that you keep you pull people deeper into your pitch until you ultimately close. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is conscious of what role he plays in this. I don't know that he would think about it.
Oh, I don't think he's conscious either.
Yeah, I don't think he would think about it in those terms either. And the question, I think, is I don't even know if the question is to assess who is worse or whatnot. But at one point in that funnel, right, there are parts of that funnel that are easier to knock off theoretically. But I think it's just as problematic because, when Rubin comes on there, he is getting a certain amount of credibility. And unless, frankly, look, I was rude and certainly got angrier than I probably should have with Michael Tracy.
With Michael Tracy?
Yeah. But
yeah, I heard that on Spotify.
But I also was not going to let him come on and say that stuff in a way that anybody could interpret it, that I thought any of it was all right. He was smearing Marcy Wheeler. He was downplaying, and this is what really, really upset me, was downplaying not just the role of the press, but everything that happened in the run-up to the war in Iraq. And in my mind, one of the things that I find really grotesque about this period we're living in now is the Reformation project of folks like George W. Bush and people like Frum and people like Bill Kristol.
And Bill Kristol.
Yeah, and exactly. And so I have a real issue with that. And frankly, when people come and say this is just like weapons of mass destruction, except for without the deaths, that's like saying, this is like wine, except for without the alcohol and the grapes. Like, I'm sorry.
Says who? Yeah.
So
I mean, the weapons of mass destruction to me is like a false equivalency. I mean, it was an investigation into the president, and I saw people like they were just trying to assess what they knew. And so when I hear like people compare it to weapons of mass destruction, I'm like, not necessarily, because there's no like ultimate goal for like a war with Russia, at least not yet.
Well, I think there are people who believe that was what the ultimate goal is. But frankly, if someone was to think that the ultimate goal was a war with Russia and they're using weapons of mass destruction, very hard for them to make the case to me that there was hyperbole and that there was hyperbole in the selling of this investigation. I happen to believe that there was, and that it was hyped and exploited, for ratings and for other, and I'm sure there was a bunch of people who felt it'd be politically advantageous to them in a myriad of different ways. But very hard for me to accept the critique basically using the same excess. But I appreciate the call. And so, that's why I wasn't going to let this guy on without it being super, super clear where I stood on this. And so that, there was no one who likes this show who was going to walk away thinking that I thought his take on this was even appropriate. Like, I'm going to be talking to Greenwald on Friday, and Glenn is going to be making, I would imagine, some of the same cases in a much more nuanced and smarter way. And we're going to have, I think, what will be a civil discussion, argument in the most sort of benign sense of the word. And, people can assess on their merits. But I wasn't going to let somebody, try and, leverage me to smear Marcy Wheeler on Twitter. And I wasn't going to let him do that on my show. And if, you do that shit on Twitter and I invite you on my show, guess what? I'm doing it because I want to mess with you. I mean, I'm sorry. That's the way it works. So,
I haven't watched Kyle and Mike yet, but I will. I'm interested in that debate. I think I might be more on Kyle's side, but I will check it out.
About what
about how to deal with Rogan.
Oh, I don't know if it was about Rogan specifically. I think it,
I thought it was.
I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I didn't get that far into it.
Okay, I need to watch
Sean, Sam, about those processing towns, what's the Spanish translation of Arbeck macht frei? Rabakuk. Congrats, Sam. Not only did you take down Michael Tracy in that epic debate, but you unknowingly robbed him of something he's been working towards in years, an interview on the Rubin Report. Rubin is so scared to debate you, he won't even have anyone tangentially connected to you on his show. Oh, if that's the truth, that would be pretty awesome. Gregory from Oklahoma.
That's a big miscalculation.
Last week, the Oklahoma Democratic Party. Oh, do we have that Dave Rubin clip?
Yeah, play. I got to go in a minute. Can we play this before I leave, please? Is this the one with Tim Pool?
Is it?
Oh, no. I don't even know.
Which one is this? Which one's the Tim Pool one?
I got to see.
I will read an IM in the meantime.
The bullfrog?
Gregory from Oklahoma. Last week, the Oklahoma Democratic Party state headquarters was tagged with racist and anti-Semitic graffiti, and last night the Cleveland County Democratic Party headquarters, about 40 minutes away south, was tagged with racist graffiti. It's really awful. Jeez, I'm sorry about that, Gregory. Horrible. Oh, wait, this is a bullfrog? What is this?
No, this is with Candace Owens.
Danarchy.
Oh, but who's put that video... What's that clip of, hey, Dave Rubin, debate Sam Seder?
I believe Danarchy.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Great DJ Danner.
Look, right now it's very Candace. We do college gigs together. Who do we get invited by? We get invited by conservatives and libertarians.
Right.
I never get invited by any lefty group or progressive group or anything like that. Would I go if I got invited? Of course I would.
Yeah.
Pause
and
it.
what do we do at the events?
Pause it. We literally got a phone call last week from the University of Alabama, the Huntsville, the someone associated with the college Democrats, who invited Dave Rubin. Not interested. Not interested in going.
But it wasn't
was it? He wanted $10,000. Is that what it was?
I think it was at least 10 G's. I thought it was more actually.
So literally, if anybody pays me a king's ransom, I will go.
That we do. I do this not just when I'm with you. I always go up there and I say, I'll ask if you disagree with me, come up first.
Right.
I always go out of my way to do that.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 256 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
My name is Jacob. I'm from Alabama.
Jacob from Alabama. What's on your mind?
I'm in the leadership of the College Democrats at my college, and I've been trying for the past 2 years. I've been trying to reach out to YF, Dave Rubin, IDW type folks, and I cannot, for the life of me, get them to come to campus. I've tried to get them to come to talk to Nathan Robinson of Current Affairs, and Nathan has, every time that I try to set something up, Nathan's like, yeah, just cover my travel expenses. And Dave Rubin wouldn't even, I was able to get in touch with his agent.
All right, well, that's it. I mean, people can go check that out. Danarchy posted that video. I was thinking about, I can't remember what it was now, the other clip that we had looked at this morning where we heard Rubin talking. I can't remember now.
I want ideas.
Where do we go? I mean, in terms of platforming, look at this. Here's Derek Black with Van Jones, I guess, on this must be Van Jones's show on CNN. And Derek Black, ironically enough, is a white nationalist, a reformed white nationalist. And here is when we talk about the idea of platforming and whatnot, it has implications. Here, play this clip first.
It's very alarming to me to see at the highest levels, even anchors at Fox speaking that way. Does it alarm you?
Yeah, it's really, really alarming that my family watches Tucker Carlson's show once and then watches it on the replay because they feel that he is making the white nationalist talking points better than they have, and they're trying to get some tips on how to advance it.
So, what changed you?
All right, and people can tune in that to find out what changed him, but that's quite an indictment. And so if that's the case, going on that show, maybe it cuts both ways. But I can tell you that I have got into Twitter fights with a bunch of different people, and there is a different character to the people who come at you, depending on who it is. And I don't spend a lot of time, and it's not scientific, but I can tell you that the people who come after me when I say something about, Hillary, very different from the people who come after me when I say something about Michael Tracy, not so different from the people who come after me when I talk about Mike Cernovich, and I don't know if you're responsible for who follows you. I don't think that you have a direct culpability, But at one point, you got to make some assessments. And I don't know people's intent, but it's awful strange. It's awful strange. And if you're not aware of who your audience is, then what you're doing, you're not doing it very well. And if you're benefiting from being intentionally vague, then and to have some consciousness of that, then I think you're not a very good person. Let me put it that way. And there's a lot of people who play that game.
Word.
A lot of people play that game.
A lot of people play that game.
You know who you are.
They might. They might. They might delude themselves in some way. Oh, let's go. These Vice people, they're not on the thing, right? Oh, this is pretty amazing. I don't have them on the... Oh, 13, 14. Okay, yeah, okay, good. Yeah, all right, let's play this. There's two things here that are these two clips. They're both disturbing in their own way. Here is a woman who describes voting for Bernie. This is a Vice roundtable. A woman who describes voting for Bernie in the primary, and then listen to how she voted in the general. And the looks on the faces of the women around her are pretty stunning.
Here, but by a show of hands, who here voted for Trump?
I don't publicize my votes, actually.
So, does anyone have questions for the women here that voted for Trump?
Why?
Okay, the reason why I voted for Trump is because I actually was a fellow for the Democratic Party, and so I just really did not like Hillary Clinton. You know, I actually also did a lot of community work for Bernie Sanders as well, and I don't know, I literally sat in the voting booth for like, it was a long time, and I don't know, I just like checked the box. Honestly, I honestly didn't even think he was gonna win, so part of it was a kind of a joke, but again, I don't know, but will I vote for him?
I want to speak to the privilege that holds for that election to be a joke for you, right?
Well, like, it wasn't really a joke. I was like, you know,
just said it.
Well, let me recant what I meant by a joke. You know, I didn't like either party. You know, I think it was like if Bernie Sanders was on the ticket, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders because I really did at the time really love what he stood for, because, you know, he really did a lot of grassroots, and I related to him as a Jewish American, and I thought that socialism was the answer. And then, you know, but then what happened with Hillary Clinton when she stole the election from him, you know, I just couldn't vote for her just because she was a woman. So I did vote for Trump.
Why not write in?
Because that's wasting a vote.
But it was a joke.
But it was a joke vote. So
right,
okay.
I mean, let me just start with saying, like, kudos for her for having the courage to say that.
I guess.
But the thing that really disturbs me out of all that, and to be clear, that the percentage of people who voted for Bernie and then ultimately voted for Trump was lower than at least it was in the last the last comparable election. But with that said, Bernie never made the claim that Hillary Clinton stole the primary from him. So I don't know where that comes from, but I do know where that comes from. And, you know, when people ask me, like, what was problematic with people like that? First of all, completely untrue. Completely untrue. Is it the case that the DNC, as an organization that had very little influence on the outcome of the election, favored Clinton over Bernie? Without a doubt. Were the debates set up in a way that the DNC thought it would help Hillary Clinton by putting him on the weekends? Absolutely. Did it turn out to help Hillary Clinton? I don't think so. But regardless, That's it. They had no ability to influence anything else. There was no stolen election. That's just the fact.
The system is rigged, but not
the system is
the
not.
election was not literally
but not
rigged.
rigged. Like that is not true either.
Well, certainly when you have to sign up a year beforehand to vote in a primary, that is in favor of establishment candidates, don't you think?
That may be in favor of establishment candidates. It may be not. I mean, it's maybe in favor of people who just, I mean, the idea that a political party is going to require, like, look, I think yes, but the rules were the rules. I mean, you could say rigged does not mean that. You could say that there are structural forces that make it easier for longtime Democrats, if you appeal to longtime Democrats, that you will get elected. But that's not the same as being rigged. It wasn't rigged prior to 1970 when there were no primaries, where it was just picked at the convention.
I would argue that it was.
Okay. Well, I mean, then if you have an
I guess it's
extremely loose, yes, except for semantics means something, because when that woman hears the word, they're stolen, the election is stolen from Bernie Sanders, that makes her go in and say, F it. I'm going to spend a lot of time in this ballot box and F it. And so it makes a big difference because rigged has a definition. And it's not, there's a structural advantage for candidates that appeal to members of the Democratic Party. That's true. That's true. That doesn't mean it's rigged in favor of Hillary Clinton. That's not true. That means
slanted, perhaps.
Not front and Hillary Clinton. If there was another Democrat, if there was another longtime Democratic candidate in there, but it's not slanted, and there is a structural advantage to people who have been longtime members of the Democratic Party. Now, is that going to hurt Bernie this time around? I don't think so. Do you think it's going to hurt him as much as it did the first time around?
Certainly not as much as it did the first time around.
Why?
Because he's more popular now.
And because he's running earlier and people now have the opportunity.
He's running to win. But I do think there are plenty of people who will intend to vote for Bernie and then realize when they show up to vote, oops, I didn't register as a Democrat a long enough time ago.
Yes. And the Bernie Sanders campaign better be out there trying to reach those people and let them know what the rules are and they get in. I agree. It should be much easier to vote for people in primaries. I would like to see same-day registration in all of these primaries. But that's a different critique than saying the election was stolen or that there was some force that was rigging the election in a way that Bernie wouldn't win because nobody contemplated Bernie running. I can assure you, Bernie figured out that he could win probably around the same time that other people figured out that he could win, and it was late in the game for any of it. And so there was nobody who was contemplating. But yes, does a political party set themselves up in such a way that they will favor their partisans? Of course. I mean, I happen to think that we should have same-day registration on primaries as well as general election. But it's sort of hard to make the argument that there was some nefarious plan other than longtime structural bias towards having people who are declared members of your party vote in the primary.
Yeah, well, some people would call that rigged, not in the literal sense, like stuffing ballot boxes. Some people will call it a structural advantage, and they have an issue with that, which they have every right to. But we go back to that woman for a second, because it reminds me of the Onion article. Ironic porn purchase leads to unironic ejaculation.
Right.
It's kind of like that.
It's pretty stunning. I got to say, it's pretty stunning. I would really like to hear from the woman in purple sitting next to her who doesn't publicize her vote.
I want to sit on this panel, but I don't want to talk about my political action.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be on TV, but and then to be fair, here is an example of I think someone who's probably more of an outlier, maybe not. But I think, yes, statistically speaking, more of an outlier. Another woman on the panel. They're all young women, seems to me. I mean, maybe everybody's young to me. But young African-American woman who had this to say as to her vote for Donald Trump.
Well, me, I support Trump simply because he's a businessman, and I come from a business family. I was raised, my dad was a single dad. He owned his own business. So, you know, who wouldn't want to vote for Trump? He's a businessman. He's a businessman. He's a whole billionaire.
It was handed to him
He's
by
an
his
entire
father.
billionaire. Just because his dad gave him $1 million afterwards, what does that mean? You have to keep up with that. How you build from that 1 million?
I personally feel like
he got that 1 million. He went all the way like into debt, almost into like what, $1 billion debt. Came up out of that and have been successful ever since. And I mean, and me, I'm not a person that just sit there and watches one news channel. I go out and I go to the Women's March. I go and I talk to everybody. I see both sides. I'm not a one-sided person. I would never be that, because once you're a one-sided person, then they can easily eat you alive.
Well, I guess it's nice that a small percentage of black people has enough money that they don't have to care about this stuff.
I mean,
and we can vote their class interests.
I think there are. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what her. I don't know that she's necessarily has money. I mean, her dad's a small businessman. That could mean any number of things, but the idea that certainly been ingrained in certain segments of our society that the accumulation of money has attributes that are associated with it in our society that aren't necessarily the case, right? I mean, Donald Trump has a lot of money. Even if he was to have earned that money himself, which I think it's very hard to say based upon how much money he was left by his dad and how much money he was given by his dad and how much of his business deals were co-signed, literally guaranteed by his dad. Just this idea that is out there. I mean, look, the Republican Party had been cultivating this for a long time. George Bush was the CEO president. Romney. I mean, this is an attitude that is out there that somehow that business is running a business is in some way analogous or an indication of how you will be in the context of public service is. I think we've seen that, you know, when you run a business, you're a businessman, you get in there and you still see it as a business. He's still running it like a business, but for him, for his benefit.
Yeah, if I cut out these judges, my path to my ends is much clearer.
Much clearer.
And small business owners did vote for Trump a lot, I will say.
Republican Party, there's a lot of those small business people. Not this one. All right, folks, that's it for time we have on the calls. I apologize. We're going to take 5 IMs and get out of here. Bullprog. Right-wing media online gets so many views because the audience is obsessed with the easily digestible and repeatable content. Wouldn't rule out multiple accounts and bot networks. Check out Smarter Every Day's video on manipulating YouTube's algorithm. Oh, I certainly will. I will definitely do that. Do some of that manipulating the algorithm, definitely. Yeah, let's see. Rude Sam Seder. Howard Schultz is having a town hall on Fox tomorrow. Is that right? Tomorrow night.
Let's check.
Chief O'Brien. Could the Trump administration be cutting aid to 3 Mexican countries in an effort to worsen conditions, create more asylum seekers, and fuel a right-wing fear engine heading into 2020? Yes. Jay Tingle. Lady Barbarino by Henry James. Thanks, Brendan. Now I own the rights. Pajama Boy. Forgot this capitalism versus socialism debate. Bring back feudalism. Jamie Peck, 2020. Oh, forget this.
Oh, my God.
Snowflake, yesterday's interview. Social democratic labor parties have been most successful in the Scandinavian countries in terms of winning elections and implementing their policies. There are many reasons and historical factors to make this possible, but a big difference from the U.S., UK, and Germany is that they have electoral systems that encourages high turnout and highly proportional representation. Is there any hope for a major electoral reform in the U.S. that could lead to these outcomes? Not in the near term. Jeremo 5, what are the chances you will not see Fox News in bars, work, and dinner places in Wisconsin? What's the percentage of people that read a newspaper every day in the U.S.? I contend that 2 or 3 low-powered AM radio stations doing liberal talk in Wisconsin would have made the difference in 2016. When is that Howard Schultz thing? Do you know?
It's tomorrow. And this just came through the wire that Bernie will be having a Fox town hall on the 15th. That's a Monday.
Ooh.
On which 15th?
April 15th.
Enemy territory.
April 15th. Darn it. Are we on...
No.
Oh, we're not on...
You're leaving for Vegas the next day.
Oh, okay. Oh, shoot. So Tuesday. Darn it. All right. Darn it. Jeremiah 5. Theo Dillion. Yo, is there a set of drill bits on your desk? Is that a set of drill bits? Right here? I don't think so. I do have a set of drill bits, though, but in the office. And the final IM of the day. Bernie won all 55 counties in West Virginia primaries, yet lost by 1 delegate vote. How is that not a stolen election? See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get